Looks like everyone's settled in by now. Absolutely delighted to see so many faces here. I'm so excited to get to this panel. We have an absolutely stacked cast, if I may say so myself. I'm going to let you all introduce yourselves. If you can, please, name, title, all that good stuff, and then also answer what stood out to you about changes to entertainment consumption across audio, across social platforms, just in recent years. I know it's a big question. It's meant to be open-ended. Trevor, why don't you start us off?
Hi, my name's Trevor Johnson. I look after what we call commercial partnership solutions. So it's bridging the gap between content and commercialization. So if we bring in content on one side, working with publishers or rights holders or creators, and bring in brands into that, so we can have that two-way relationship between monetizing content but driving brand objectives. The pace of consumption, the pace of change, the pace of how people are seeking entertainment on their device as opposed to on their big device, that's probably the most surprising and interesting thing, just the rate and the pace of consumption and change in consumption.
Jasmin?
I'm Jasmin Dawson, Senior Vice President of Digital at BBC Studios. BBC Studios is the global commercial arm of the BBC, so we work on building fandoms for our incredible IP, everything from sort of fairly new brands such as Bluey to classic brands like Doctor Who. So to answer quite a complex question, I think the rise of the creator economy across sort of all platforms is definitely something that is changing the game and something that's really exciting for us at BBC Studios.
Katie?
Katie Bowden. I'm the Managing Director at Global, so my team look after all of the commercialisation across our audio properties. I think probably one of the big changes that we've seen, particularly over the last 5 years, has been the use of smart speakers. And I don't know if we would have seen it coming at the beginning, but it's one of the most popular things to do on a smart speaker is listen to live radio. So that's been a really, really exciting development for us to see continue to pick up pace over the last few years as well.
And Ed?
Hi, good morning everyone. My name is Ed Couchman and I look after advertising sales for Spotify here in the UK. Firstly, it's great to see such a packed room actually. So I'm going to zoom out a little actually and then zoom back in. So if I zoomed out back to 2008, which is a slightly longer time horizon, but I'll come back. That was when Spotify was launched, and I think the first significant change was to make it easy for everyone to listen to music streaming legally. So I think actually historically, most of us listened illegally, right? So I think that's a really good shift that actually we are listening to music and watching other content legally rather than illegally. So we can then give money back to the rights holders and content creators, which is really important. So for example, in the UK, last year, Spotify gave back to, globally, 7.7 billion. Back to the sort of rights holders. So that's a really fundamental. Then if I was to zoom into much more recently, the most significant shift we've seen is this coming together, this sort of merging of audio and video, that we see a significant step change in video consumption on our platform. That could be anything from song lyrics, music videos, or more personally, I think, video podcasts as well. So this coming together of audio and video.
So lots is changing in terms of consumption. I'm curious, from the broadcaster perspective, how have you looked to thus reposition your content and also your audience targeting strategies? And is it working alongside platforms more like we heard earlier with ITV and YouTube, or are there other content strategies that you guys are looking after? And perhaps, Jasmin, you can kick us off.
Absolutely. I think putting the audience at the heart of everything we do. So no matter the platform, the audience obviously consumes content in completely different ways. And then also if you understand your audience, then having a really deep relationship with the platforms to make sure that you understand what the roadmap is, what's coming up, so that you can stay one step ahead, and making sure that in those changing consumption habits from the audience, you understand what the platforms need and want, and also the advertisers. So that's sort of the trifecta of those three things is really what we're focusing on, which enables us to sort of grow significantly, not just from an audience perspective, but also from a revenue perspective as well, which is really important from a commercial and global perspective for us.
And Katie, Ed mentioned that audio is increasingly becoming video. How important is that at Global at the moment?
I mean, I think the relationship between the social platforms and us as a broadcaster has always been quite symbiotic. if you think about the live nature of particularly radio, it was so natural for us to move into the social space. And then when I look at how our listeners, users, whatever you want to refer to them as now, interact with our brands, we have over 500 million video views every single month across social platforms, across our broadcast portfolio, which I think is a reflection of just how our audience now interact with the brands. So I think it's been certainly a big opportunity for us. And I think when yesterday we obviously announced the summertime ball for those Mariah Carey fans out there. She will be here in June for the first time in 6 years. And how we actually promote that and distribute that message. I mean, social's a massive part of how that audience find that news, how excited they get about it, how we interact. And I think particularly short form video on social for us is really, really, really popular.
Well, Trevor, it's a good time for you to come in, I suppose, then. How do you balance working with the established publishers versus all the creators out there that are using your platform?
I mean, let's just take a step back. So, and we always say this and people roll their eyes, but TikTok isn't a social platform, it's an entertainment platform and it's a discovery platform, right? And I'll give you the reason. When people pick up their phone to engage in TikTok, they want to see new products, they want to see new entertainment, they are there to watch, not to check. So they're in a different mindset, they're in a different mode, they put their headphones on, they're wanting to consume content in their feed, and they have a real high tolerance for content they scroll through. So when we think about what the opportunity is for creators and for publishers, it's to be in a platform or in a device where discovery is at its center, right? People want to see new things. And there is a very close relationship between the content creator, the creators, and between community, right? Those three things come together at scale within that platform. So when you ask that question, we don't really see a balance. It's what people do. It's what people consume on their platforms. So understanding that TikTok is a discovery platform where you have to create content that engages people and people will watch it at scale. And that could either be from publishers or from rights holders or from creators and creators at scale. That's the power. And that's what we're seeing in terms of the shift in terms of the consumption of entertainment on these devices, particularly on TikTok.
But then how do you cut through the noise if you're any individual, whether it's a creator creating a new podcast that you're putting out onto all these channels, maybe putting video onto TikTok? Create
great content. It's as simple as that. Like, you have to create thumb-stopping content, and you've probably got more permission to be discovered on our platform because there's people are in that serendipitous mindset where they are going to discover new things, and they're on there for a long period of time because they want to discover new things. And if they see something which is from a brand that they know or from a creator that they know, and it really taps into them as a community. So people are tapped into interests. So if you think about the hashtags that now people aggregate themselves around on our platform, around the content that people are interested in, that's what triggers people's consumption and people's interests. So create great content, know who your audience is, understand that there's interest in communities, don't think about demographics, think about all those other things, and that's how you get people to really engage in your content on the platform.
What about for Spotify, Ed? I mean, what's the relationship between established publishers versus someone like me who might just want to be starting another podcast? I also have a podcast. You can listen to the media. It's on Spotify. It's on the platform. How do you balance that relationship?
Well, firstly, great you have a podcast. I would encourage you to buy some ads to promote that podcast, if I could just do that quick plug.
Why buy ads when I have a captive audience?
I'm sure as a content creator that you want to expand your audience. Jokes aside, though, I think it's a really important thing about discovery, because I think all content creators have some things in common. I think Trevor's touched on it, but essentially they want to build communities and engage that community, and quite frankly, they want to make some money at the same time, right? That's really what they want to do, and I think Spotify is embracing both of those things. We're pretty good at helping listeners and now viewers find new content with our algorithms. I'm sure all of you have enjoyed our Discover Weekly is a really good illustration of that. That's introduced you to new artists and new podcasts, so we have that good discovery. We have, jokes aside, built a whole range of tools, systems, and advertising products to help content creators be discovered as well. We have a very straightforward outcome that you can buy some ads that drive to listening, and you only pay on that if someone's actually started to listen to your podcast, for example. And then the other side of what we've recently introduced is having podcasts actually take a share of our subscription revenue. So we have this dual revenue stream for content creators, both in terms of subscription revenue, but also from advertising and advertising solutions as well. So I think those things come together to help content creators build community and make money.
Can I add one more thing? Because there's the ads piece, but if you're creating content, particularly on our platform, allowing your community to play with that content, right? To leverage that IP, to promote it to other people within their circles. That's really important. So some of the things that we're trying to do in terms of things like Spotlight is working with big brands, big entertainment people. Let's look at the example of Squid Games on Netflix, where they allowed people to really play with that content, right? To reproduce some of the characters that were in there, to really tell their community about what was happening, maybe redo some of the really iconic images or iconic scenes that were in that. So being able to be flexible with how people are utilising your IP as opposed to really trying to own your IP, because you know that really breeds your community, that breeds awareness, that breeds consumption, and ultimately we see that it makes sure people actually download and watch the thing. That's another thing as well. So yeah, there's buying ads, this is great, but the organic piece, the IP piece, the allowing your community to play and to celebrate their fandom within that is really, really important. And those are the things we need to be thinking about.
Katie, you mentioned that the relationship is sort of symbiotic among people on this panel, but I'm curious if you think platforms can be more than just a sort of discovery or marketing tool for a brand like Global or for a brand like the BBC and all of the work that you guys do. I mean, can you actually make money substantially by putting your content on these platforms?
Yeah, there's lots of opportunity in terms of branded content. So probably as a good example, we have The News Agents, one of our most successful podcasts that we launched a couple of years ago now. And social is a huge part of extending the audience that we interact with. But for our main partner, HSBC, it's also a great opportunity for them to think about how they can integrate into that content as an opportunity. So I think that certainly in terms of our branded partnerships and how we are seeing them more than just radio, extending into event environments, extending into social environments, extending into beyond, video and what we do there. It means that for an advertiser, there's so much that they can now do with that partnership. It really linked back to your point, Trevor, around IP as well, is that no longer are you just a static audio opportunity. You have to really, really think about the 360 opportunity and how you want to interact with the audience and meet the audience in the space that they're coming to your content in.
Is it all about incremental audiences, essentially, in terms of reaching out into other platforms and beyond your space? Yeah,
I think you get a bit of both. I think you also get an international community with it as well that we see. Particularly some content can really pick up pace outside of the UK. But I also think that you see a big trend, I haven't got the stat on the top of my head, but our audience really wanting to connect with us in more than just one way. So if we look at who comes to our events, be that the Summertime Ball, the News Agents on Tour, there's a fandom, to your point, around wanting to connect to those presenters, to that content in a different way. And I think that's where you really see an opportunity for us to connect beyond just, the show that we might be working on at that particular point.
Jasmin, I saw you nodding earlier as well.
Yeah, I just think it's really interesting when you talk about incremental audience, because I think if you get into sort of conversation as to whether it's duplicative or incremental, you're sort of missing the point. I think ultimately, to Trevor's point, if you're thinking about your audience and creating amazing content for each platform, it's all going to be a sort of holistic experience for each individual, because they're seeing each step in the storytelling, and it's going to be a different story each time. So I think what we're really focusing on is like more is more, and therefore, given that sort of we are democratizing the landscape as we have more creators and more publishers, and essentially, is there ever a difference now? Everyone's just creating amazing content, and therefore the fight for attention is the really important point. And therefore, if you're creating amazing content, you shouldn't be thinking about the incremental. You should be thinking about how am I engaging and focusing on watch time. That's the big difference for us. We're not chasing views. We've got incredible views. 14 billion last year is a really great stat. But what we're more focused on is that engagement and that watch time. And I think that's where we sort of really need to work with the partners on how much data can we get? How can we tell that we're getting an engaged user? Because an engaged view is far more important to us and the advertisers that we work with, rather than just a straight impression.
Do you worry at all about not having full control over exactly how your content is showing up in the platforms, because everyone's TikTok's different, everyone's Spotify's different. All those recommendation algorithms that you mentioned earlier are unique to the individual. So I might never see any BBC Studios content on my TikTok feed if that's not what the algorithm thinks I'm interested in. Does that concern anyone?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think we all want to believe that we have control over our brands, but we don't. Like, I think you have to acknowledge that the audience want to play with the content. They want to be able to have their own stamp. And there's a point to that you want to be able to build advocacy for your brands by letting them do that. But it obviously can go too far, so you've got to play that fine balance. So yes, does it concern us? But I think we need to be able to lean into it and be able to understand where we draw the line.
And also, to add to that point, I think it comes back to the power of the brand.
Yeah.
And we certainly see that from our perspective. You know, we look at one of the biggest UK radio brands, Heart. When someone gets a smart speaker, we want them to play Heart. Right, that then connects them straight into the content. So I think the importance of brands and the importance of marketing those brands and what your brand means to the audience becomes even more important for discoverability. Because, as you say, there is an element of how do you control how your content shows up, and therefore I think it's really around brand.
Ed?
Yeah, I was just going to build on that a little, actually, because I do think the economics and distribution model, particularly for podcasts, has really changed in the last sort of couple of years. Before this panel, I think Simon Kilby was here from Bowden, and we caught the end of that keynote, and he talked, I think it was Ken Bruce that talked about trust, or human connection, that breeds trust. And I think that's at the heart of why we're seeing this explosion in podcast consumption, essentially, that other news outlets or other platforms, there's this sort of suspicion about that content. And I think what we're seeing particularly from UK consumers is an implicit trust with podcast content, a little bit deeper, more of an intimate relationship. And I think that's from the content creators. And then I think it's about how we're going to distribute that. And I think the model from going to one individual platform for distribution, I think that's now changed. And we're seeing content creators go across multiple platforms to maximize their reach, essentially build that community, maximize their commercial return, but then creating slightly different versions of that content, or could be anything from an edited clip to make sure that it's sort of fit for purpose for those individual platforms. Because as Trevor made this point earlier, not all the platforms are the same. I think there's this umbrella term for social media, but different platforms have very different consumption behavior and very different consumption needs. And I think it's important for content creators then to create content that's right for each of those platforms, essentially.
From a podcast perspective, I'm a massive LBC fan, huge. But outside of that,
Add the news agents,
and specifically the news agents. But the whole thing around creating the snippets of video and distributing those snippets within the discovery feeds, and then that driving actual download and listen of those podcasts is huge, right? A lot of my feed is that it is from TalkSports or whatever it is. It is the snippet and the key moments from those video podcasts, which is about driving awareness and depth, and yeah, I'm sure there's incremental audience as well, and understanding that's how it works, right? That you drive awareness in one place and hopefully it drives engagement in the other place. And the other thing is about utilising creators. So we talked about control, but allowing creators to play with your brand or incorporate the things that you're doing into the stuff that they're doing to connect to their audiences increases the opportunity for you to drive incremental audience as well. Yes, there is always some risk in that, and you have to be a lot more relaxed with how you are allowing people to play with that. But that's how it works, right? Utilising creators to tell your story to their community, which may not be your community, that then they become your community is huge, and that's what we really need to be thinking about as well.
I want to bring measurement into the conversation. Somehow, we haven't talked about measurement yet this morning. I feel like it's always the number one topic at all of our events, and for good reason. When you're putting pieces of content, especially from the broadcaster's perspective, in different locations, whether it's on TikTok, on Spotify, on YouTube, also, of course, on the radio, on television, all these different places measure things differently. So how do we ensure advertisers have an actual holistic view of exactly what they're sitting against and how well it's doing and are people watching?
I'm happy to jump in initially on this one. I think that, I've worked in audio a long time, and the stat that always sticks in my head is that over 20% of the UK's media consumption time is with audio, but we certainly don't see that reflected in terms of advertiser investment. I think that measurement, particularly when you look at how consumption has so significantly changed over the last 10 years, is really, really important. I think we need support from clients, and I think we need support from agencies, because every single big media owner in this space has a way to measure and deliver outcomes for a client and to show how that delivers on their plan. But often what we see is it can sometimes be an afterthought. So, every single big marketing client who invests a lot into the space will understand how to measure their media plan. But often what we then get under the skin of, go, well, how are you measuring audio? And there hasn't been thought really put into how that's done properly to show impact and effect. And I think that's sometimes why we see a disconnect between the media time spent consuming this medium through to the investment that's actually been made into it. So I think for us as Global, it's always been something that we will talk a lot about with our clients and agencies, is how can we show the impact of your plan and ultimately what outcomes are you measuring. I think we're also in the world where that's been driven a lot and defined a lot by the digital platforms, and those metrics don't always work for what we want to measure. I think also the obsession with performance, and I think we've been in a challenging economy for a long time, so you're always going to see that obsession from clients. But ultimately, audio, and I'm sure Ed jump in here, we see it contribute right the way through the line in terms of that consumer journey. I'm not going to reference the funnel. The funnel's out of fashion now. But I think that really coming together as an industry and understanding how we prove that impact. But we need the support of advertisers and the agency community to do that.
Yeah, I would just really vocally +1 to that. Simon said beforehand as well, like there is a underinvestment around audio, and I think we need to come together as an audio industry. Spotify is, of course, audio visual, but we need to really underline just what difference audio is doing to people's attention, that actually it's a trusted medium. People are turning to it for entertainment, to get their news, their current affairs, and actually I think we need to do a really good job to encourage advertisers to increase their investment, to get involved, and also, like I said, we need to make sure we can really deliver real-world outcomes and demonstrate real-world outcomes, because really that's what advertisers predominantly are interested in.
Trevor, what's TikTok's view on this? I mean, I think when I talked to Jenny Fernandez at a previous conference, she suggested that a view on TikTok is essentially as long as the video is shown up on someone's feed, and regardless of how much time they necessarily spent with it.
All large platforms, including ourselves, are relentlessly focused on measuring lift or outcome, right? The challenge is working with the third party or the end advertiser on linking their data with our data, right? And the ability to be able to get the data we need or to share the data we need in order to measure that lift, which is why someone like Jenny has got a really a great job where we have to, when we're working with advertisers, work with agencies, we have to work with them really, really closely to ensure that we have all the data we need to be able to look at the impact that we have when it comes to either views or shares. And we want to measure it right down to how much someone has spent in the shop, right? Or the impact it has on driving uplift in the ratings when it comes to watching it on TV or driving traffic elsewhere or consumption of podcasts. All of that is stuff we want to measure. It's just that there's the gap between what happens on our platform and being able to measure it. And we need agencies, we need third parties, we need all of the data providers to be able to help us bridge that gap. And those are the conversations we're having at this moment in time, because it's not easy making that link. But we are relentlessly, as all platforms are, relentlessly focused on ensuring that what people do on our platform drives outcome and it drives lift.
Jasmin, what's been your concern around measurement, if you have one?
I think I mentioned it earlier in terms of chasing views and chasing reach. I think that pressure on return on ad spend is obviously, it's relentless. And, you know, as you mentioned in terms of going into, I don't want to use inflammatory language, but sort of obviously there is pressure to make your budgets work harder and smarter for you. And I think there is a tendency to then default to the cheapest media you can to get the most effective reach that you can. But I would encourage, and there is a changing conversation around the sort of reach and scale and sort of how can you make it work, I guess, most cost efficiently for you, to that impact conversation, and really thinking about that engaged view. And I know there's tension around sort of like what is a view and what is that impression. And I think that's a conversation, but I think the most interesting conversation to have is what is the impact for the advertiser and for the client, and that's going to change depending upon what their challenges are, and therefore really focusing on sort of watch time, engagement, and really tailoring. And unfortunately, that's going to take time. You have to work with an advertiser to go, what is your challenge? What are we trying to work with you on? And then being really clear as to what value each of you is bringing to the party. Because I think the best partnerships are where it's not just transactional and going, what am I getting out of this partnership? It's a long-term understanding of a shared audience, shared challenge together to be able to create a really great partnership. And we've got some fantastic examples of that with our BBC Earth channels and Top Gear with the Audi Dakar. And we're really hoping that sort of as we sort of scale our portfolio over the next year, we can get better long-term partnerships that show impact rather than just focusing on those views.
It strikes me that we're talking all about changes in consumer behavior. I think it's important that we measure the extent to which consumer behavior is changing. Mm-hmm. So maybe views aren't necessarily the best metric for that, for especially a lot of people in the room, but it is good to understand, are people actually switching and mostly watching TikTok, mostly listening to Spotify, or interacting with brands in different ways as well. The light is flashing. I just want to ask one further question of everyone on the panel, reclaiming time back. We've talked about what has changed. I'm curious what you think is going to change in terms of consumer behavior going well into the future, let's say the next 5 years or so. I mean, it's very challenging to predict that far ahead. No one has a crystal ball. But in terms of, based on the trends you're seeing now, what do you expect consumer behavior to look like, in a couple of years from now? Trevor, why don't you kick us off?
So outside of entertainment, what we're investing a lot in is in commerce, right? So if you have a discovery platform, and people are looking for things to do and things to be engaged with on their mobile devices, we always talk about people don't go to TikTok to shop, but they shop at TikTok at scale, right? So they may buy products, they may buy services, they may buy content. So we're seeing that the acceleration to serendipitous discovery, consumption of commerce on our platform is huge. And that opens up significant opportunity for entertainment, right? Because then you start to think about tickets, merch, content, all of those sorts of things that people just, if you have the right message delivered through the right person, which could be a brand or a creator, and is delivered to the right person at the right time, they're probably going to buy it. So start thinking about that when you're thinking about driving more monetization opportunities for you and broadening what entertainment means on these video entertainment, not social platforms.
Jasmin.
I'd love to build on that because I think it's really exciting. The rise of, I'm going to say social e-commerce, but
yes,
I appreciate
you're fine. You can say that's right.
In terms of being able to sort of connect those dots, and I know you sort of mentioned earlier about the disconnect between sort of social platforms and then trying to connect that to like a TX. I think that's ignoring the fragmentation, right? And I think really what you want to do is understand that the audience wants to get closer to the things that they love the most, and therefore providing a really seamless experience where you can think about, if I'm a creator, what do I want to be able to give to my audience, whether it's something completely bespoke and tailored for Bluey, that you're creating a bespoke T-shirt that you can sell right then and there. that I think is incredibly exciting. I think also, really acknowledging that creators have really come into their own and dominated and are rivaling us for attention. I think working with them and it being a true partnership is definitely where we need to be going. I think 5 years, who knows what's going to happen in the next 18 months. So I would say focusing on the near term and planning for that and try not to worry about 5 years because who knows.
Katie?
I'm going to answer this from an advertiser perspective. I think that podcast investment will double from an advertiser. If we look at where we are now, look at what's happened in the States, I think that will just continue to pick up pace. I hope by that point that the audio industry as a total would have doubled in advertising revenue. That would be wonderful. But I think what will really drive that is that in 5 years' time, I hope we're sitting here talking about the outcomes that audio can deliver, because I think we've got so much in our armoury now to be able to measure and show that value back to the advertising community, that I think the conversation will become very much around that in the next probably from now to the next 5 years.
Ed, final word.
I would love the podcast market to double, so we're going to work together on that, and maybe some other people in the room. I actually think the platforms are going to merge or converge around entertainment, essentially, and then it's all going to be about what platforms have what content, and that's all going to be then how do we make content creators build their community and monetize. Trevor said about merch and tickets, we're already doing that. We're creating shops or commerce experiences for artists and content creators. But I think there's generally going to be a battle, or there is a war going on for content creators right now. And you can see all the platforms playing out to try and attract content creators, because they know that's going to be different to build an audience, essentially.
Well, lots to look forward to and ask further questions about in the future. But for now, thank you so much for your time.